right, guys. Well, I'm going to get started, and then hopefully the minute I start, these folks will join us. So welcome, Gaynor School of Cooking, and this is our February Valentine's Couples Night. So we're going to start by making the pastry for the pie. So that means, Laurie, they can relax for a minute while we make the pie base, okay? Now, traditionally, this is a British recipe, and traditionally the pastry is actually made with suet, which I know people in this country, you can't get it, and people gag when I talk about suet because it's like a byproduct from making beef. But it's used quite a lot in like steam pie, steam puddings and things, suet. And for this instance, I can see why it would be used. So we're going to use either Crisco or lard, whichever you have. It doesn't really matter. I prefer lard to Crisco. I wasn't brought up on Crisco, so I'm not a huge Crisco fan, but I was brought up having a lot of pastries made with lard. My mother-in-law made all her pastries with lard, including her sweet ones. And it gives a shorter, more crumbly dough. And it's a nice texture, really. So that's why a lot of people use it. We didn't have Crisco, so we used to use that instead. So for this, there's a little bit of baking powder in this. And obviously the flour, the baking powder is going to help it rise. But I didn't put my baking powder in. I'm going to go grab it. I just realized while I'm talking, I didn't put it in. I usually put it in with my flour. Just a little bit there, like that. There we go. And I'm putting my salt. I'm going to mix my salt in here as well. Just a big pinch of salt, like that. And then we're going to put. Easiest if you can do it in the mixer. If you've got to do it by hand, you can do it by hand. But if you've got a food processor, it works really well. With your Crisco or your lard, whichever you're using, just pop it in little pieces, all right? Cut your pieces up. Yes, you do want to cut it up. I mean, when you make regular pastry with butter or margarine or whatever, you always want to cut your butter up because it mixes in better, particularly if your butter's, like if your things are cold. And with butter, you usually want to use it cold, so it tends to be hard to break it up if it's not, not cold. Now, you just there we go. You're just going to pulse this just a number of times to make it like breadcrumbs, all right? Now, what I noticed last night, I think this is why some people's dough was a little dry, was they didn't add enough water to it, all right? So the general rule when making all pastry, you add your water a little bit at a time, and then if you make it in the machine, because you don't want to form a ball in here, because that will overwork the pastry too much, which means it will really shrink, okay? So I'm going to start off with 2 tablespoons of water. Now, I know, as I've been telling everybody the last week or so, I have a 50-pound bag of flour, and my bag of flour is particularly dry, which I know sounds silly, but it does vary. Different bags of flour, different times of year. This one's particularly dry, so I'm generally having to add more liquid to get my dough the right consistency. If I made this recipe in July, I wouldn't make this pie in July, I may only need like a tablespoon of water. My basic pastry recipe, where 1.5 cups of flour, 4 to 5 tablespoons of water, we literally sometimes only add 2 tablespoons of water in the summertime. With this one, I mean, if I was making my regular pastry with this, I'd probably be adding 5 or 6 because it is particularly dry. And it varies from brand to brand as well. So you always got to assume it's an ever-moving target, and never assume that every time even if you buy gold medal every single time from the same store, it's going to vary a little bit. And if you've had it in your freezer or if you had it stored outside, it's going to vary. Pulse it just a few times to distribute the water. You just want to distribute the water. We don't want to make a ball. So after you've added 2 tablespoons, take a handful of the flour mixture and squeeze it in your hands. Now, probably it'll start to fall apart, which mine has, all right? So I'm going to add another tablespoon and do the same thing again. I'm going to do it a tablespoon at a time, or, a little bit at a time, I should say, until I get what I consider the right consistency. Now, again, only enough to incorporate it like that, all right? Food processors are great, but they're not great if you let it form a complete ball. Okay, now I can tell this feels wet to the touch, feels damp to the touch. So I'm squeezing my pastry, and it's pretty much coming together in my hand. Now, I can tell when I go like this, It's a little bit, I've got a few bits coming off. So I'm going to literally add about a teaspoon. And it sounds really silly, but a little bit makes a difference. And when you're getting close, you really want to add it in a very small amount, because that 1 teaspoon will be the difference between it being great and if I added too much, it being really over, too much liquid. Yeah, it's fine now. It feels, when I squeeze it in my hand, it comes together in a dough. All right. So we don't want to let it form in a ball on there. I'm just going to move this out of the way 1 second because it's easier to do it without this. So what we're going to do, we're going to tip this out on your work surface. All right. Careful, you don't touch the blades. And then we want to bring this together into a ball. All right. So the best way to do it, I can stand here and go like this and squeeze it in my hands, but I'm holding it in my hands, making the dough warm, which again is not good. We don't want to make the dough too warm. So what I'm going to do, this is a little technique called frizzage. And basically it's a way of bringing the dough together using the coolest part of your hand, the heel of your hand. All right. So what I'm going to do, I'm pressing little tiny bits of this into the work surface so it sticks together.
Oh, okay.
Little tiny bit at a time. You can use both hands. And all this is doing is the same as you scrubbing it in cleaning your hand, but the difference is you're not making it the dough warm. You don't want to make the dough warm. Okay. So you just do it enough that it's nearly all together, and then just bring it together. Little squeeze like that. It should all stick together. All right. If it's not sticking together, then it's probably a little dry. And you want to have it in a sort of disc, because rather than a ball, because if you put it in a ball, it's a lot more harder to roll out when you take it out the fridge than if it's in a disc, because you've got a round ball. So either put it in a bit of plastic wrap or in a Ziploc bag or something so it doesn't dry out, and pop it in your fridge. Okay. All right. And then I'm just going to pop it right in there and pop it in the fridge, and then we'll come back to that later on when we need it. Okay. All right. So we are going to, I understand you're ahead of me now because some of you got your veggies all chopped up. I do not. So I'm going to chop them up. With your leeks tend to be dirty. So you really have to wash them after you slice them. So I'm going to slice them in about 1/4 inch wide slices. It doesn't really matter. You can do it long ways if you want to do it. It really doesn't matter. This is a big leek. It takes some cutting through. But I'm going to put it in a strainer and really make sure that I've got no dirt up in there, particularly in the end. Often it gets quite a lot of dirt in there, and it's really easier to clean it once it's chopped up. All right, so I'm popping it in a strainer and just give it a quick wash. Now you want the size skillet you want to use, about 9 or 10 inch skillet, obviously something that you can put under the broiler at the end. So as long as it's not got a wooden handle or something, you should be fine. Give it a shake. So as we're cooking these first, I'm going to suggest we put these on while we prepare the other veggies. So I'm going to use, this is the size skillet I'm using, like a 10-inch non-stick skillet. All right. And in here, we're going to melt our butter. I think I say a tablespoon, right? Yeah. So about a tablespoon of butter. Just melt it. And then you're going to turn your heat down low, because we don't want our leeks to get any color on them. We just want them to soften when they're cooking. All right. We don't want them to go brown at this point. So while that's softening, I'm going to peel my potatoes. And my other veggies. And obviously you could vary the vegetables you put in this, but it is traditionally something made with the good old fashioned veggies, you know, it's carrots, onions, celery, potatoes. But you could add other things as well if you wanted to. You could even do like, I mean, one thing I might put parsnips in it. I love parsnips. Other root vegetables, rutabaga or whatever, would be just as good, cut into small pieces. And if you wanted to leave the potatoes out, you could add sweet potato to it, or, you know, whatever you like, really. And you want to cut your potatoes in sort of about 1-inch size cubes, roughly. All right, so give my potatoes a quick wash. Turn my heat down on that. So once your butter is melted, you can add your leeks to your pan. Turn your heat down nice and low, and we're going to cook those for a few minutes just to soften them. You probably want to separate them, the rings out, particularly the bit ones near the end, so they cook evenly. Probably should have done this before I put it in the pan. Would have been a good idea. That's okay. All right, I'm going to turn this down and let those cook gently. So as I said, with these, I'm going to cut them in sort of 1-inch cubes, roughly. Yeah, sweet potatoes would be nice in this as well, actually. I love sweet potatoes. That's one thing I never had till I came to the States. We didn't have them in England. They do now, but they didn't have them when I was living there. I'd never had a sweet potato before. So I do enjoy them. I have 2 pieces of celery here because they're small. So I'm using 2 pieces here. So same thing, you just want to cut them sort of 1/2-inch size pieces, and the same with your carrots. Now, I'm not sure whether you guys managed to get fresh thyme. You usually can get it, but it doesn't matter. Dry thyme works just as well in this recipe because, you know, it's going to be stewed and everything, so it's actually great. Works fine. All right, so with my carrots, I'm going to cut these probably in about 1/2-inch pieces. Pop those to one side as well. And give your veggies a sort of stir around the leeks a bit to get them cooking evenly. That'll take a few minutes to cook. So for my ham, I actually realized when I picked this recipe that I had a load of ham in my freezer left over from Christmas because I bought a huge ham at Christmas time and we didn't eat it all. So I've got all that lovely ham here that I had from there. So I'm going to cut this into chunks, and it tasted really good last night. As I made this dish last night as well, I told my girlfriend that I'm going to bring a Valentine's dinner tomorrow morning. She can have this tomorrow night for dinner because I decided I don't want to eat it. Well, I will be eating it 2 nights because we've still got some left, but I really didn't want to be eating it 3 nights in a row. So I told her I'll bring her dinner. She's very appreciative. She doesn't like to cook very much, so she always enjoys it. And it's good to have someone to give the stuff to, because I sure as heck don't need to eat it all. So just keep stirring those leeks to make sure they cook nice and evenly. I hope you guys managed to get some cider. But I haven't got hard cider in a long time. I had a quick swig of it last night. It was good. Now, with your thyme, if you're using the fresh thyme, you want to get the thyme leaves off the stalks, because the stalks are very, very coarse. So best way to do this, if you don't know, is to take a piece like that, and the leaves are facing upwards like this, and hold the top and pull the leaves off. I'm just going to put these in a little bowl towards you, and they'll come off. All right. So just get a bigger piece. So this is my leaves are up like this, and I'm going to go like this, and I'm going to slide my hand down there. And we want, I think I've got a tablespoon and a half. I think I've got there or something. Something like that. Thyme is a wonderful herb. Wonderful, particularly because it lasts a long time. It doesn't go bad very easily, like basil and parsley and cilantro. All right, so my leeks have softened up a little bit. They're not really soft. It doesn't matter, because obviously we've got a lot more cooking to go yet. So what we're going to do now is put in all our veggies and our ham. All right. So throw your veggies in. And again, if it looks like you've got a bit too much for your skillet, just maybe don't put all the veggies in. But you should be like, they're going to go down quite a bit. And they want to come, it wants to be fairly full. I'll show you what mine looks like. So I have it's pretty full, okay? And that's good, because we want the pastry to kind of sit on the top. And I'm going to throw in my thyme. Throw my bowl in as well. And let's make sure, okay. And then the flour, all right? So now what the flour does here, you add the flour right on the top, and we put the flour in first before we add the cider. And what I want you to do is to stir that around a little bit to mix the flour in, so that it doesn't come directly in contact with the cider when we put it in. That's so it doesn't go lumpy. So in other words, you're basically coating all your vegetables and your ham with that flour mixture. And obviously it will get some of the oil on it, the butter on it rather. And that means that when we add our cider, it's not going to go, the flour's not going to go all lumpy. All right, so just give it a good stir. And it should not disappear, but almost look like it's disappeared. All right. And then once that happens, then we can slowly add our liquid. Okay. So let me just open my cider. So if you've got a regular bottle of cider, you've got about 1.5 cups. You can add it all, or you can add a little bit less. It's up to you, really. So what I'm going to do with this, with the cider, is I'm actually going to put the pan here and show you, and then I can put it back on the heat. So I'm going to put a little bit in, like that, and then I'm going to stir it in. And then I'm going to add a bit more. And stir it in. This just means it stirs in evenly, gets evenly distributed, and you can see it'll start to sort of look a little creamy on the bottom. All right. Now you don't want to add too much, because you want this to stay fairly thick. So that's why we're measuring the amount out. And I'm going to put most of mine in. I'm going to have a little bit left at the bottom, which is going to be mine. Yum, yum. Tastes great. So you should have like a creamy mixture in there now, creamy colored mixture in with all your veggies and everything. And what have I missed out? So let's see. Oh, just the, yeah, so salt and pepper and your sour cream or your creme fraiche. I do have some creme fraiche because I made it for one of my other classes last week, but sour cream is perfectly okay. So creme fraiche is made with cream and buttermilk. You basically heat cream, you can buy it, but you can heat cream to 100 degrees with a tablespoon or a cup of cream, tablespoon of buttermilk. Heat it up, 100 degrees, let it sit out overnight, covered with a piece of cheesecloth or a light dish towel, tea towel, and it will thicken and get a slightly nutty taste, all right? So stir that in, and then I do now want you to, when we've done that, we're going to put some salt and pepper in. So just put about half a teaspoon of salt in. We can always add a bit more afterwards. And then I'm putting in a good, probably a half teaspoon. I'm just guessing. I love pepper, so putting a fair amount of pepper in, just personal taste, and then we can correct it afterwards. Now, I do want you to put it back on your burner, and I want you to increase the heat a little bit because we want to bring this to a boil first, and then we're going to turn it down to a simmer. All right, we want it to boil so we get some thickness. That's how we get the thickness out of the flour, by bringing it to a boil. Oh, a little bit left. Yum, yum. So let it come to a boil, and then we're going to turn it down to a simmer. And I would suggest we push it to a back burner, and it's going to cook for about half an hour or so until our veggies, potatoes in particular, because they're going to take the longest to cook, until they are just softened enough for you that you want to eat them. And then what we do, we put the pastry on the top, put a lid on, and cook it for another about half an hour or so. All right. Okay, let me just wipe off my, we'll wait for that to come to a boil. There we go. The only downside about doing these virtual classes, I don't have anyone to wash my dishes. To do it all myself, or we have to do it ourselves. I'll get my husband to help me, but I don't have assistants, obviously. So, all right. So watch for your bubbles and make sure it comes to a boil. And then the idea is we simmer it nice and low, and we stir it once in a while to get the veggies soft. Obviously, the carrots and the potatoes will take the longest. Now you could do it like this and just eat it like this and not put a crust on it, but the crust is kind of fun. Right, just going to wait for that to boil. Clean my knife off. And this chutney we're going to make is great. You probably won't eat it all tonight, but you can. I mean, you can either eat it warm or room temperature, but you can also refrigerate it and have it on other things. Us Brits like chutney on cheese sandwiches and things. We're crazy about our chutneys. I think we get it all. Our chutneys originated from India, and a lot of chutneys in Britain have components in it like cumin, curry powder, things that you would that come from India. So that's where the idea of chutney comes from in the UK. All right, I've got a few bubbles. Let's see. Let's move it around a little bit. All right. So I'm almost at a boil. This one burner is a little bit uneven, so just going to let it bubble all over. There we go. And I'm going to push this to my back burner and put my heat on really on a low simmer, because the one thing we don't want all that to evaporate, and we also don't want it to stick to the bottom. So what you want to do periodically, give it a stir around, move those potatoes and carrots and everything around so they cook nice and evenly. And that's going to take about half an hour or so to get nice and soft. All right. Okay, so far, guys. We good? Good. So we're going to do the chutney next. All right. Because that can sit and do its thing. Let me make sure I've got all my ingredients here. Yes, I do. Now, again, being a British recipe, we use malt vinegar. That's what we put on our fish and chips. But balsamic works fine. You want a flavorful vinegar, a sort of rich flavor. And I think balsamic's a close comparison with the with malt vinegar. But you can get malt vinegar, but not all over the place. Our ingredients here then, so we have a malt or balsamic vinegar, onion, brown sugar, apple, raisins or golden raisins, the walnuts, your spice blend, which is ground ginger, mustard seeds, curry powder, cayenne pepper, and a bit of salt. All right. So what we're going to do first, you want just a small skillet for this. We're going to dissolve the sugar in the vinegar. So put your brown sugar and your vinegar in your skillet and pop it over a low heat and let the sugar dissolve. All right. Oop, I've got a piece of carrot in there. I don't think I've got a piece of carrot in there. All right. It usually helps if I turn the heat on. Come on. There we go. So just let that melt over a gentle heat. And then if you haven't already, you want to peel and dice your apple. Sort of small, half-inch cubes, really, for the apple. I've got a nice honey crisp here. I love honey crisps. I'm so glad they seem to be less expensive now than they used to be. First couple of years ago, they were so expensive. Now they seem to have come down in price a bit. Always up for a bargain. Move this to one side. So just keep an eye on with the sugar at the side. There we go. So as I say, fairly small cubes for your apple. Let me show you. So I've got pieces like this, and I'm going to cut that in half. And then, so cubes sort of about this sort of size, I think is good. All right. Oop.
Bring it forward.
There we go. So I think my sugar's almost melted. So with this spice blend, again, you could make substitutions there. If you didn't have curry powder, cayenne, you could use a bit of chili powder, maybe curry powder. You could just add some hot sauce, some more chili powder or something like that. All right. My sugar's pretty much melted. I've got a little tough piece in there that's resisting melting. So I'm going to let that just simmer for a second to break that down. We're going to put all the other ingredients in except the walnuts, all right? The walnuts are going to go in at the end so they stay crunchy. So I don't know how you guys cut your onion. I know Laurie knows how to do this because I've showed her. But best way to cut an onion is to cut it in half and then keep the root intact and cut it around like that. So you've got it all intact like that. And then you can turn your knife the other way and make even slices. And that usually means that you get better, whereas you just chop it randomly, you get all sorts of different size pieces. All right, mine has melted. So I'm going to put in the rest of the ingredients, everything except the walnuts. So that's our apples, our onions, our raisins, all our spices, including the salt, okay? And I've got all my spices together in a little container here so I don't forget anything. And my raisins in there. And I'm going to give it a stir around. And then again, this is also, you want to put this on a low heat, guys. Let it come to a boil, then turn it down to a real low heat. And let it just do its thing. And then the nuts will go in at the end once it's all nice and soft. So I've given it a good stir around. And I'm going to pop it back over here. And let it simmer away and do its thing. So I've just got my walnuts left now, and they will go in at the end, okay? All right. Put those over there. Trying to keep a tidy workspace, not always that easy. All right, so we okay so far, everybody? You good? Just wipe my space off. And we're going to do our soup next. I think. Am I going to soup next? Yes. All right. So has everybody got that? You guys both got your chutney cooking? Yeah. And remember, give your, don't forget to stir your ham mixture. Should just be simmering. All right, so are we ready to move on to the soup? You're going to need your blender for this. You can do this part with an immersion blender as well, but the regular blender is a little less messy, I think. But if you've only got one, you can use one or the other. All right, now with this recipe, if this was the summertime, I would be making this with some lovely ripe tomatoes. Obviously, this time of year, we don't have ripe tomatoes. I've been using ripe tomatoes and a bit of tomato juice. As we don't have ripe tomatoes this time of year, and they're not very good, we're going to use the canned ones because they've got more flavor. All right. So we have the tomatoes. We have chicken broth. I have half a jalapeno, a piece of ginger, some garlic, onion, sugar, and the garlic, that's the other garlic for that. And then what else am I missing on here? Something else. Oh, the chicken stock I said, right? Yeah. And yeah, everything the onions I'm going to chop up. So what I want you to do first, with your tomatoes, I want you to drain them. Because I'm not sure how much juice you've got in there. All right. Give them a good old shake. And your tomatoes are going to go into your blender. So tomatoes into the blender with about half of the juice you've just drained off, roughly. All right, about half of the juice, that's going to go in as well. The rest of the juice you should save, because if your soup's a little thick at the end, you can add that instead of adding some more stock or just water. So keep it to one side, don't throw it away. All right. All right, so we want to just blend and purify our, and it takes no time at all because they're soft and everything. All right, so I have my tomatoes with half of my juice in here. This is my bread for later. I have my jalapeno. So let me put this to one side like this. All right, so I am going to cut my other onion. Now I have a fairly big half here. You want about a cup of onion, all right? And again, you want to chop it evenly and fairly small. Again, it doesn't have to be that small because we're going to puree all this at the end, but we do want it to cook. So I'm just making those horizontal cuts into my onion again like that. Vertical cuts, I should say, not horizontal. So they're all like that and they're split. And then I'm going to dice it up as well. I'm going to cut it again, equal size pieces. So about a cup onion. All right. And then my jalapeno. Now, the amount of jalapeno you add is up to you. I think I'm going to put, this is about a third of a big one. So I think I'm going to put all of this in. We like things fairly spicy. So I'm going to roughly chop this. And I'm going to also chop it up with my piece of fresh ginger. Now, fresh ginger, the best way to peel it is you just take a knife and just scrape it off. You can even use the side of a spoon. So I'm just going to roughly cut my ginger and my garlic just in some pieces like that. And then I'm going to do the same with the pepper, and I'm going to live dangerously and leave the seeds in. And then we want to mince this. Now, when you mince, you want to use your large knife, put the flat of your hand on the front of your knife and rotate the knife backwards and forwards. My seeds are popping a bit. Make sure they don't go in my eye. And you can do all three things together. So nice and small, really nice small pieces. You have to watch those peppers because the skins are waxy and sometimes they don't chop up very well. So all nicely minced together like that. So I have my onions, I have my garlic, my ginger and my jalapeno chopped up. I have my bit of sugar here, and I have my cumin and my chicken stock right here. Mine is chicken stock that I made at home, homemade, so it's in ice cubes, and I've just filled it up with the water to come to the right amount, okay? So what we're going to do, we are going to cook the onion, the garlic, the chili, and the ginger over a moderate heat until the onions are soft, about 5 minutes, 5-6 minutes, something like that. So get a pot that you're going to cook it in. Turn that down a wee bit. So we are going to add a little bit of oil. Where's my oil go? There it is. A little bit of olive oil in there. And gently heat that. I'm just giving my chutney a stir. starting to soften up. You want it with your chutney. Not only do you want your vegetables soft, you want the liquid to get sort of slightly syrupy. All right. So you do want to cook it to that extent. Remember give your stew another stir so it cooks evenly. All right, so I've heated my oil a little bit, so I'm going to put in my onions and my jalapeno and my garlic and my ginger. All my favorite things: jalapeno, garlic, ginger, and onions. Don't want to waste any. Make sure I get it all in. Give it a little stir around, and over sort of low to medium heat. All right, because again, we don't want to burn the onions. We're trying to cook the onions perfectly so they're sweet and they enhance the flavor of the dish. If they cook too much, they're bitter. If they don't cook enough, they're really sharp. So just enough to get them to soften up. And that will take a few minutes. Once they soften up, we're then going to add chicken stock. Sorry, the cumin first, I beg your pardon. And we're going to add the cumin, cook it for a minute, and then we add the tomatoes, the broth, the sugar, and a little bit of salt. And we're going to cook it for about 20 minutes uncovered. All right. Gentle heat. Again, we want some reduction, but not too much. All right. We don't want it to disappear. And then if you have an immersion blender, you can use that. If not, I would suggest you let it get cool before you put it back in your blender, because something hot in the blender tends to, for want of a better word, and sometimes it'll come out the top. A glass of water. I'm going to show you one of the products of my labor earlier on with the kids. We made Valentine cupcakes. And they had so much fun. I don't know who's going to eat these though. I definitely don't need to eat them. And last week I gave them to the neighbor's kids. I think she'd be mad if I did it again. So I don't think I'm going to. I've still got a cake in the fridge, half of it from Thursday night's Fine Cooking 3 class, which is a whole Genoise. I'm trying not to eat the stuff, but of course when you're stuck inside all day, you're like, oh, maybe just have a little bit. All right, so we want to get those onions nice and soft, all right, before we put the cumin in. And stew definitely needs a bit more because it's my veggies are still, my root vegetables are still pretty firm. They don't have to be completely soft because they're going to carry on cooking when we put the pastry on the top, but I like to sort of have them pretty much, I can get a knife into them. So my chutney is starting to come together and evaporate a little bit. You just want, as I say, you do want to get that syrupy, but you want to make sure it doesn't burn. So you just got to keep an eye on it, okay? All right. My onions are fairly soft, all right? So I'm going to throw the cumin in and stir that in and let that cook for about a minute. Really brings out, oh, the smell of that cumin, it's wonderful. Brings out the smell of the cumin. Get up your nostrils. Woo! That's a bit, here we go. You have to be careful when you're doing a relatively small amount like we're doing tonight that things don't catch on the bottom, because normally if you were doing this for 6 people, you'd have 3 times as much stuff in there, so it's less likely to catch and things. But you do have to watch it when you're making a relatively small amount. And the same applies to your chutney. I can see my chutney starting to thicken because I'm getting more viscous bubbles. And that means the liquid's evaporating and it's getting more concentrated, which is a good thing. Now, the sugar in this recipe helps to sweeten the tomatoes, all right? So that's kind of why it's in there. Just gives a little bit of that sort of sweet and sour thing that's going on. All right, so I am now going to pour in my tomato puree that I made. And my sugar. And my chicken stock. And then also a little bit of salt and pepper. And again, we can correct the seasoning on this as as it's cooking. All right. A little bit of salt. And then give it a stir. Now, I want this to come to a boil. And then we're going to turn the heat down. And what I'm going to suggest, although I don't say it in the recipe, only because we're doing a relatively small amount, is that we half cover. Get the right size. We put a lid on. When I say half cover, I mean like this. You put it half on, half off. All right. Once it comes to a boil, turn it down so that we don't get too much evaporation. We want a little bit, but we don't want it all to disappear altogether. Okay.
Are you doing that half cupper on the soup or on the chutney?
Half cover on the soup. On the soup. Yeah. The chutney we do want to reduce. Mine's starting to sizzle away now. It's getting slightly sticky. I want it to get a little bit more sticky. So I'm really going to keep an eye on it because I don't want to burn it. But it's starting to thicken, which is good. It tastes really good. Yum, yum. I think I'm using the same spoons for everything, but never mind. So hopefully your potatoes are cooking. Mine definitely need probably another 10 minutes or so, I think. 5 minutes maybe.
Almost become like a molasses.
So as I say, bring it to a boil, your soup. I'm going to move over here and then turn it right down to a simmer and partially cover. The partially covering means you don't get condensation that falls back into the soup. It means you get a little bit of reduction, but not too much. Last night I left mine open and it reduced a bit too much, so I had to put more water in it, which I kind of wanted to avoid doing. I remember you have got that extra bit of tomato juice, hopefully, that you can use if you need to. Oh, that chutney looks wonderful. I could just eat that straight out of the pot as it is. I love it. Where's the thing? All right, so my soup is just at a boil now, so I'm going to turn it down to a simmer and partially cover it. All right. Okay. My chutney now, I hope you guys can see that a bit. It's kind of thick. The liquid is kind of syrupy, and that will get more syrupy as it cools down, okay? So I'm just going to throw my nuts in here. Like, I don't know what I did with them. There they are. And I'm going to let this sit in the pan just turned off because I kind of like to serve it warm, although I'm not actually serving this tonight. But anyway, I'm going to leave it just in the pan. Stir the nuts in. Don't cook it anymore. And just put it to one side. All right. Okay. All right. So everybody's got their soup on, right, guys? So we're going to do the we're going to do the croutons next. No, I'm going to put the top on the we're going to roll out the pastry. I think we'll do that next. If you just, I'm going to check and see if mine is if my veggies are soft, is what I'm trying to say. Sorry. Yeah, my potatoes are pokeable. Carrots are pretty much done. So as long as you can get a knife into them, leave it on while we carry on with and do the pastry. But I want to get the pastry on. So you want to have some room on your workstation, and you want to have some flour on your work surface, and get your pastry out of the fridge. Now, don't put too much flour down. You just want to put enough down to stop your pastry sticking. You add a lot, you're going to dry your pastry out and make it not good. All right. So enough all over the thing here. I'm going to put this on overhead now so that you guys can see how I'm rolling this out. Hold on 1 second. I have to put my mouse. I'll come around there and do it. It's easier like this. Oh, really? There we go. Sometimes my mouse sort of shuts itself off, which is a good thing, because otherwise the battery will run out, but it's annoying because I have to keep puffing around with it. Okay, so this is the same rules as any pastry rolling out your dough. You flour your work surface, you do not flour your dough, all right? Let me just position this a bit better. There we go. You also, whether you've got a rolling pin or if you're using a wine bottle or whatever, you need to have flour on that as well. You need to keep it floured so it doesn't stick to your dough. Now, I have a rough sort of circle here. I want to try and keep that in a circle. The best way to do that is to rotate the dough a little bit every time I roll. Not a quarter turn. If I do a quarter turn, I'm going to end up with a square or a rectangle. All right. So also, you want to roll your dough and turn it, roll and turn it, excuse me, so it doesn't stick to your work surface. Okay. As it's fairly cold, I mean, it shouldn't be that hard actually, but you want to go gently at first. So you do a small roll, put your hands over the dough on the rolling pin. Small roll, give it a little turn. Small roll. You can push it together on the sides if you need to. Small roll, little turn. This dough does tend to crack a bit more than a buttered dough because of the Crisco and or lard, whichever you're using, but don't worry about it. You can kind of push it together as you go around. So you want to go gentle at first, because if you push it hard, it's really going to crack, all right? Small rolls, be gentle. Yeah, mine's cracking a bit on the side here. That's okay. I'm just pushing it back together. I always say if your dough's hard to roll out and it cracks a lot, taste-wise, it's really good. Maybe a pain in the neck to roll out, but so I'm doing little turns to work on getting something like a circle, all right? If you do have a crack on the side, if you hold the dough above your hand and roll into it, you'll be able to rectify that crack a little bit. Put your hand there, stop the top part of dough moving, and roll the other bit of dough into it. So just keep going round, small, all the way across your dough. This is how you keep it even thickness. Otherwise, if you do it from here, this bit's going to be thick and it's going to be uneven. So you don't roll off the end, all right? Because then you'll end up with really thin ends and you don't want that. This little bit's being very stubborn tonight. And if you've never rolled out pastry before, don't be intimidated, because I'm not having the best success with mine tonight and I've done it thousands of times. So don't be worried. As I say, it doesn't matter too much if it breaks. Even if it breaks on top of the pie, it's not a big problem. And this is a fairly fragile dough, but luckily we don't have to put it into a pie dish. That's a good thing. Now you want it big enough to go into to sit on top of your ham, okay? We don't want it too thin, but we do want it big enough to pretty much, to cover the bottom of the thing completely. This little bit's being very stubborn tonight. Doesn't want to. There we go. And again, I've got a little bit sticking there, a tiny bit. So what I'm going to do, I go over here, grab a bit more flour, bring it back. Okay. Now, when you get to this sort of size, you can then sort of just go around and thin it out a bit and work on doing a little bit at a time, because you really want to try and keep that round shape. But sometimes it's a little easier just to do this, but going from at least the middle out and making sure you're fairly, but your dough looks fairly evenly thick. All right. I'm saying 1/2 inch on there, but most importantly, you want enough to cover all your thing. We'll see if I'm pretty good. All right. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to bring this right here. I'm going to fold my dough in half. I'm going to lift it up. I'm going to lay it on the top like this. And then take the other side and open it up. It's a little bit cracked right there, but that's okay. And it's up the sides a little bit. Now you could trim it down, but really and honestly, I don't think you should. I think you should just leave it as it is, because it will shrink a tiny bit anyway. And hopefully yours is all still in one piece. Last night, not everybody's was still in one piece. Okay, in there like that. This is now going to go back on a simmer and you're going to cover the pan, all right, for about another 25-30 minutes, okay? I am turning my soup down a bit. It's a bit hot. There we go. I'm going to put my timer on so I know where we are time-wise with that. All right. As I say, hopefully you managed to get it all in one piece. Did you? Dough rolling is not, as I say, mine was being a bit funny with me tonight as well. So don't worry about it. Okay. So the next thing I want to do is we want to make our little croutons. Now, you can make these heart-shaped or not. It's entirely up to you. And I'm hoping I'll make my heart-shaped. I'll find my heart-shaped cutter. I had it here a minute ago. It's got, there it is. Now, I only have, because I've been using, I have a little tiny heart-shaped cutter, little wee one like this. All right. So if you've got a big one, you can make just 2 croutons or 4 croutons, whatever you want to do. All right. But you want to take your cookie cutter, whatever you're going to use, and cut out croutons, whatever shape, or you can just do regular sized croutons if you want. I've got some nice fresh bread here, which is not the best bread for making croutons with, I don't think, but I've been making bread all COVID season. So I've got bread coming out the wazoo. So I don't buy bread these days. So that's why I'm using this. But it's with my plastic cookie cutter, it's a little hard to cut through. These are fun. I mean, you know, you can make them any shape you wanted, really. I just thought it was a nice little idea with the red soup to make little heart shapes. Whoop. There we go. So I'm going to do like 3 out of each piece of bread. Yeah, this plastic cookie cutter with this very dense, very nice dense bread is not the perfect solution. So I'm going to do like 6 of these. That's what I can get. I can get 3 out of each slice of bread. And we're just going to, they're kind of, as I say, they're just kind of fun. One of the things you have to work on them, well, not work on, you've got to be careful with when you do these is that you allow your butter and oil to get hot enough that before you put them in, because if you don't, what happens is they get very, they absorb an awful lot of the fat. If the fat's nice and hot, they'll start to brown straight away, and you'll have nice crispy croutons as opposed to ones that are a bit, you know, a bit fatty, a bit oily, I should say, not fatty. Of course, I cut this bread as well, so it's got a bit dry on the outside. So I'm trying to cut through it. Oh, there we go. Whatever. This is a really good loaf of bread, but not good for making, not great for croutons. There we go. All right, so I have 6 little tiny little hearts. That one's not much of a heart. It's lost its bit at the top, but never mind. There we go. And we're going to saute them. So just any small skillet is fine for this. And we're using a mixture of butter and oil so that the butter doesn't burn, and also for flavor. If you just use butter, you will get those little black bits, and which will not look nice on your croutons, okay? So let that melt and get nice and hot. Now your extra clove of garlic and your sea salt if you want it. But your extra clove of garlic is to rub on to the hot croutons when they come out. So just cut the top off your garlic. You can peel the skin off as well if you want to. So you've got like a cut edge, exposed edge of your garlic. You do it in half. It's a big one. I've got a very big one here, so I'm just going to take the top off. And then basically what you do is you rub the garlic over the surface of your croutons once they're cooked. And then you can sprinkle them with sea salt if you want to. All right. All right, so my oil and butter is really sizzling. So I'm going to pop my little croutons in, and you just want to cook them till they're golden brown on each side. Where did one go? Okay. I thought I did 6 of these, and I only see 5 now. Oh, well. Did I lose one? That's so weird. I definitely cut 6 of them. Did I drop one on the floor? No? I don't know where it's gone. Oh, well, never mind. Doesn't matter. So just golden on both sides. You might want to use a pair of tongs to lift them out or something, or a fork or something. I'll find my tongs. Don't see them. All right. All right. So nice and golden on each side. Just flick them over. Yeah, it's really strange. It's like literally just, I'll find it later. It's probably the other side of my counter, I bet. I probably knocked it off. But So that nice high heat has got them nice and brown really quickly. No, it's not on the floor. Yeah, if my puppy was still here, I would definitely say she goes upstairs with my husband because she's a little tyke. She eats anything and everything, including me most of the time. But and I'm going to drain them on a bit of paper towel, guys. Okay. So these are nice and crispy brown, beautiful. Going to pull them out, and then you just float these on your on your soup. All right. So just drain them so that you've not got all that fat, and then just take your garlic when you can and touch them and just rub it against the surface on both sides. Flip them over. Just gives them a little tang. And if you want, you can sprinkle them with sea salt. I think I'm going to leave that off because I think I'm going to give these to my girlfriend tomorrow, so I don't really want to put salt on them right now. But and they can just sit to one side. I'm going to just move these out of the way. So it's kind of fun to say my little cookie cutter wasn't the best thing in the world, but it did the job. We got something heart-shaped. That's the most important thing. Okay, how are we doing time? Oh, good. Just checking our time. Okay, now our dessert couldn't be simpler. All right, really, really easy. I decided as we were doing our pastry and our croutons and our soup and everything that we would do a very nice, simple dessert. I have a few strawberries, but as it's been so cold, when I took some of my strawberries out of the fridge about an hour ago, they had frozen. So they were gone all mushy. There were a few that were okay. Luckily, I've got some raspberries as well. So I'm going to do raspberries and strawberries. It was like, I don't know whether where my fridge is, it's a cold part of the room. I don't know what happened, but they didn't look very happy at all. So I'm going to do a mixture of the two. All right, let's check my soup. Give it a stir around. All right, I think it looks pretty good. I'm going to turn it off. Everything seems kind of soft in there. So I'm just going to turn it right off and leave it to cool a little bit. All right. So with your fruit, you want, I'm just doing a small bowl because I'm only going to do a few of these, but you want something non-metallic, all right, to put your fruit in and to macerate it in. And what we're going to do with the strawberries, we're going to slice them and pop them in. And then I'm going to add the raspberries. I'm going to add whole. And then I've got my raspberries. I did wash these earlier on, even though they're in the container. And this is, I mean, we do this with all sorts of fruit. We do it in our fine cooking one with oranges, or we do it with blueberries. And you can really, like, you know, brighten up a fruit or make it more interesting by just putting some sugar and a little bit of anything on it. I mean, very often, like when we do oranges, we slice the oranges, mix them with some sugar and some Grand Marnier and let them sit. All right. So you want these, you want them fairly, it doesn't have to be completely in one layer, but you want them fairly shallow in the bottom of your pan. And then you want to add some sugar. Now, if you're doing the whole recipe, I think we've got like, whatever it says, like a third of a cup or something. I'm going to put in about 2 tablespoons, and this is a small amount I have here. And then, as I say, I've got some Prosecco, but you could put anything on you like. If you don't want to do Prosecco, you could do anything. Grand Marnier is a wonderful thing with vegetables. If you're doing something like raspberries, if you can get a raspberry liqueur or something like that, really, really great. Or, framboise, which is a raspberry liqueur, but something else I was thinking of. Kirsch. Kirsch, drunk on its own, doesn't taste terribly nice, but if you mix it with the fruit and put sugar in with it, it's really good. Another variation that I do quite often. This is not with alcohol, but basically take blueberries and mix them with macerate them, which is what this process is called, with maple syrup, proper maple syrup, not pancake syrup, and then serve them with sour cream or Greek yogurt. They are to die for, particularly as well if your blueberries are a little sour, which they often are. It's amazing, absolutely amazing with the maple syrup. And I do the sour cream, creme fraiche, sometimes Greek yogurt. All right. So I'm just going to put enough of this in to sort of almost cover my fruit, but not completely. Give it a little stir around. And I'm going to let that sit at room temperature. And I'm going to move them around in there a little bit. Now, you can serve them just as they are, or I'm going to put more sugar in actually, or you can serve them with, again, with ice cream over some pound cake. You can serve them with the liquid, without the liquid. You know, you're not limited to one particular fruit. And as I say, if you have fruit that is not, you know, you bought your berries or something, even in the summertime, and they're not very good, they're not very sweet, this is a good thing to do with them, is to mix them with a little bit of sugar and a little bit of booze of your choice. And with the Prosecco, it's very, very light. Probably more a summer dessert, but Kaiser goes with the theme of Valentine's Day, doesn't it? With the red fruit and the pretend champagne. So nice, really simple thing, which you can just, as I say, just have a yogurt or whatever. And the amount of sugar you put in is entirely up to you. And you can combine 2 different types of fruit or 2 different types of alcohol or something if you wanted to. All right. I'm just going to take a quick look at my pie. Yeah. All right. It's coming on nicely. It's starting to firm up a little bit, which is great. So we're going to need another 15 minutes on that. My tomato soup, I'm going to leave this to cool a bit. I am actually going to put, I know I'm going to need this. I'm going to put a little bit more of my tomato juice in. And then I'll puree it when it's cooled down a little bit. All right. You can strain it and strain out tomato seeds if you want to, but I don't think we're going to bother somehow. All right. So our salad, very simple salad. Salad greens. What the interesting part of this is this rather unique dressing. Now you do need your blender for your dressing. All right. So if you do need to, which I do, rinse out your blender. I would do that now. So although this is a dressing, it's an interesting dressing because it has tomatoes in it and other things, which is kind of nice. So okay. So for this, we have, where did my mustard go? There it is. So we have garlic, basil, fresh basil. Never use dried basil, it's horrible. Olive oil, balsamic vinegar, and tomato. Okay, this is our dressing, all right, which is going to go on our very simple salad greens. So it's the dressing that is the star in this instance, all right? So with your tomato, what I want you to do is we want to take the seeds out. Now, there's a relatively easy way of doing this. If you cut your tomato this way, so I've got a plum tomato, I'm going to cut it in the middle this way, and then you can scoop the seeds out with your fingers. Just take your finger, stick it in, and scoop out the seeds from each little pocket, or as much as you can. All right. Still didn't find my other crouton. The ghost came and took it. And then what I want you to do is to just roughly chop your tomato up. Excuse me. Take out the stem bit, don't want that. All right, so those are chopped up. And then I'm going to mince my basil. I'm going to use the rest of this because it won't last if I don't. So we're going to mince this the same way we were mincing the veggies just now. And I track down my big knife. There it is. So just going to mince it a little bit because it's going to go into the machine as well. So just chop it up a little bit. All right, like that. And then my garlic. Again, I'm going to chop this up roughly. Get my words out before I put it into my blender. And then you want about, as I said, 1/4 cup of olive oil, which I have over there. It's got a really thick, you know, that end piece, really thick bit on there. So roughly chop it up like that. Okay, so into our blender, everything, first 5 ingredients. So the tomato, basil, vinegar, Dijon, and your garlic clove. All right, so that will go in. That's my garlic, my basil, my tomato. And then about 1.5 teaspoons of balsamic. And then put that away. And then about 1/2 teaspoon of Dijon mustard. Nope. Oh, don't like this squeezy bottle of mustard as well. Ah, there we go. All right. And then we are going to puree this. But I suggest I find my lid first because otherwise it's going to go everywhere. So we are going to puree this. And then what you're going to do, you're going to put it on and you're going to undo the top bit, this bit, and you're going to pour your oil in. All right. So turn it on. I would do it fairly low to start off with. And then gradually undo this and pour your oil in. And then you can turn it up a bit. And you should have a sort of nice creamy dressing which smells wonderful. Now you do want to season it with a bit of salt and pepper. So you probably want to pop it in a bowl and then season it. And this looks really creamy. This looks like it's got cream in it or something like that, but it doesn't. It just has all those lovely ingredients in there. So definitely needs a bit of salt and pepper. A bit of pepper. And then let's give it a little stir. And taste it. I've forgotten how good that was, even though I had it last night. Okay, so that is our dressing. me get rid of some of this. So, all right, according to my reckoning, I've got about 6 minutes on my pastry. So I'm just going to straighten up my stuff here a little bit so I can see the wood for the trees. Okay. So that is my dressing sitting right there, which we can put on some salad greens in a minute. I'm going to put some salad greens in a bowl. You could obviously add other ingredients, but I must admit, if I have a really good dressing, I'd rather just have straight salad greens and enjoy the flavor of the dressing. You get this open. So I'm going to put just a couple of handfuls in there like that. And then don't dress your dressing, don't dress your salad till right before you're going to serve it. And if you're doing this for a lot of people, don't be tempted to do a great big bowl of salad and dump dressing on it, because if it doesn't get eaten, you've now wasted all that salad, because it can't keep it. It'll go all slimy and yucky by the next day. Okay, I would suggest, if you can, put your broiler on now to let it start warming up for your to put your pastry in. And you want your rack sort of about 2/3 of the way up, not too high, because if you have it too high, it could burn. But I've moved mine up just one rack. It's about 2/3 of the way up in my oven. Oh, this looks great. Looks fantastic. Has got a little bit of color on it, which we'll get. I'll just show you. All right. So I'm going to let that sit there until my broiler preheats. Just going to clear this. And you're going to take the whole skillet and just put it under the broiler as it is, all right? And then it will, it'll brown nicely in there. And if your soup isn't turned off, turn it off now. All right. And yeah, I'm going to add a bit more seasoning to mine, but I'm going to wait till I puree it first. It's probably best to wait till you puree it and then season it. Okay, because then sometimes the flavor, obviously the flavor will change a little bit. All right, my broiler is getting red, which is good. So I'm going to take the whole thing, then take the lid off, obviously. And your pastry should have some color on it already, but we're just going to brown it up a little bit more. All right. So it should kind of look like this. Does yours look like that? Good. All right. So run it under your broiler just to give it a bit more color. Having that lid on helps to give it a bit of color, which is nice, because last night I did it without the lid on. It didn't brown as much. So I think it's better to have the lid on. And I'm gonna move my chopping board out of the way. Wipe down this. Just keep an eye on it though. Don't let it don't ruin it now by letting it burn. You don't want that to happen. We have done so well tonight. I'm just cleaning up my horrible mess here so we can actually. Yeah, we're getting there. We're getting there. And then the last thing we have to do with your relish, I mean, you can put it in. I'm going to put it in a little container so you guys can see what it looks like. You can eat this, or you can reheat it to eat it, or you can have it at room temperature. And as I say, even cold, it's nice, but it does go really well with this, you know, with the pie and lots of other things. So if you can see it, hopefully you can see as I'm pulling it out, it's fairly a little bit sticky, which is good. It's exactly what I wanted. It's all kind of holding together. All right, let me go check mine and make sure I'm not burning the top. I'm sure I'm not, but all right, I think mine looks pretty good. So obviously you would serve this in your pan. Now, if you have, I have a bigger one, which I didn't use tonight, but a really nice thing to use would be, I'll show you, I have, and if I was doing this for a few more people, I might use this. I have a Le Creuset like this, which would be a really nice oven to table container, but it is bigger. So I didn't want to use that tonight, but that's a nice thing to use. Oh, this is a bit dusty. Obviously, though, as long as you've got a heat pad to put it on, you can serve it right out of there. Let it cool a little bit and then serve it. And the steam's coming up. It's shrunken a little bit. So that's why I was glad it came up the sides a little bit. All right. All right. So I'm going to leave that there. So the last thing we have to do is to puree our soup. I did not get my immersion blender down. Oh, I can see it up there, but I can't reach. Right. I got to get on my step to reach it. I can't reach it. Trouble with being short. There we go. Got it. Now, again, you can do this in your blender. But as I mentioned just now, if you're going to do it in your blender, I suggest you let your soup get cool first. Or at least, you know, not bubbling. Because it will tend to sort of, I don't know what you call that, but it can be dangerous, all right? But these things are amazing. They're not expensive. I had one at the school for ages, and then I bought myself one for home, and I love it. It's great because it works. And a lot of them come with like a beater on it, you know, like a whisk on it as well. This one doesn't. But the one thing you have to be careful of when you're using one of these is that you keep these bits with the holes in submerged. Otherwise, it jumps up and splashes you, which is not very pleasant. And they usually have one or two speeds on it. That's the fastest speed. So you usually want to sort of go like that, up and down, and say, make sure, which is why I'm doing it on an angle, because I've got a fairly big pot here. I want to make sure that I keep that submerged. Whoop, see, happens. Very easy to get it coming up all over the place. Woo! All right. So the way you want to check that it's all, you know, all mixed in, just take a spoon and just kind of run it round inside to make sure you've got most of it. As I say, you could strain it and strain the seeds out, but I don't think it's really necessary to do that. It looks really nice. It depends how you're going to serve it. If I was serving this like a first course, I might thin it out a little bit so it wasn't quite so thick. But I think it's really nice like this, or you can just leave it exactly the consistency it is. It's up to you. So I'm going to put a little bit in a bowl. I know it's not very hot at the moment. I'm just going to put it in here and then I'm going to reheat it later. And then just put a couple of my croutons on the top. My little love hearts in there on the top. All right. So I'll just do this so you can see everything. All right, so let me bring this all together, move this out the way. All right, so we got everything in the picture? I think so. So my soup here with my little croutons, my dressing, which I'm not going to put on the salad right now, but you just want to, the trick is don't put too much on, all right? And then also I have my lovely chutney here, and you can see how nice and brown my pie is, and it is cooked completely through. I know it's interesting, Laurie, you wouldn't think that would happen, but it's quite a clever little technique that it's kind of surprising that it actually works. Okay. And I think we are pretty much finished. I know we're a few minutes early, but that means you get to eat earlier. Yes, we are. Wow. We worked really fast today. I worked you really fast today, I should say. So hopefully everything turned out well.